The chandelier cast dancing shadows across the ballroom as Elena Rosewood adjusted her emerald necklace, a family heirloom that felt heavier tonight than usual. Around her, Silicon Valley's elite mingled at the annual Tech Innovation Gala, their laughter echoing off marble walls while champagne flutes clinked in celebration of another year's achievements. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host's voice boomed through the speakers, "please welcome the visionary behind Sterling Industries' groundbreaking quantum computing breakthrough, Marcus Sterling." Elena watched her husband stride confidently to the podium, his silver hair perfectly styled, his smile radiating the charm that had once captivated her at MIT 20 years ago. Beside him walked Vivian Cross, her scarlet dress commanding attention as she placed a possessive hand on Marcus's arm. The cameras flashed, capturing what tabloids would surely call tech's new power couple by morning. "This revolutionary advancement," Marcus began, his voice carrying across the silent room, "represents 5 years of dedicated research and innovation. Sterling Industries continues to lead because we never stop pushing boundaries." Elena's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Those were her algorithms, her late nights spent coding breakthrough solutions while Marcus entertained clients. Her doctoral thesis on quantum entanglement had laid the foundation for everything Sterling Industries had built, yet she sat in the shadows, introduced only as Marcus's wife when anyone bothered to acknowledge her presence. "The future belongs to those brave enough to reimagine it," Marcus continued, his eyes finding Elena's briefly across the crowd. For a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with, the struggling entrepreneur who'd knocked on her dorm room door, desperate for help with a failing startup. But the moment passed as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold calculation she'd grown accustomed to. Vivian stepped forward to the microphone, her voice honey-sweet yet sharp. "As Marcus's partner in this venture, I'm thrilled to announce our merger plans will revolutionize how the world processes information." Partner. The word stung more than Elena had expected. The applause thundered through the ballroom as Marcus and Vivian raised their joined hands in victory. Elena remained seated, invisible among the crowd, remembering how she'd once believed their marriage was built on mutual respect and shared dreams. Instead, she'd become a silent investor in her own humiliation, funding the very empire that now excluded her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel Hayes, watching the livestream. "You deserve so much better than this, Elle. The patents don't lie, that's your work they're celebrating." Elena smiled sadly at her oldest friend's message. Daniel had been warning her about Marcus for years, but she'd been too loyal, too hopeful that love would eventually triumph over ambition. She'd watched her inheritance disappear into Sterling Industries, believing she was investing in their future together. Instead, she'd financed her own erasure from the narrative. As the evening wound down, Marcus approached with Vivian still attached to his side. "Elena, we'll be staying late for business discussions. Don't wait up." His tone was dismissive, treating her like a household staff member rather than his wife of 15 years. "Of course," Elena replied quietly, gathering her purse. She'd perfected the art of graceful exits, of swallowing her pride in public while her heart broke in private. Walking alone to her car, Elena caught her reflection in the building's glass doors, a brilliant woman made invisible by her own generosity. But something was stirring within her, a reminder of the fierce determination that had earned her dual PhD degrees before age 25. The morning sun filtered through the silk curtains of Elena's study as she sat surrounded by boxes of memories, each one carefully labeled and dated. Marcus had left for his business trip to Singapore with Vivian, giving Elena the space she needed to think clearly for the first time in years. The house felt different without his commanding presence, quieter, but somehow more alive. She pulled out a box marked Sterling Industries, Origins, and lifted the lid, releasing the scent of old paper and forgotten dreams. Inside lay the remnants of their beginning, handwritten business plans, prototype sketches, and financial projections that painted a picture of desperate ambition. But buried beneath these artifacts was something Marcus had clearly forgotten existed. Elena's fingers traced the edges of a leather portfolio she hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside was their original partnership agreement, drafted during those frantic weeks when Sterling Industries teetered on the brink of collapse. She remembered that night so clearly, Marcus pacing their tiny apartment, his dreams of revolutionizing technology crashing against the reality of empty bank accounts and impatient creditors. "I'm going to lose everything, Elena," he'd whispered, his head in his hands. 5 years of work, and I can't even make payroll next week. The quantum research is so close to breakthrough, but the investors pulled out after the prototype failed. Elena had watched the man she loved unravel, his confidence shattered by circumstances beyond his control. That's when she'd made the decision that would change both their lives forever. Opening her laptop, she transferred her entire inheritance, $8 million from her grandmother's estate, into Sterling Industries' operating account. "What are you doing?" Marcus had asked, staring at the transaction confirmation. "Saving our future," Elena had replied simply. "But I need certain guarantees." Now, 15 years later, Elena reread the contract they drafted together in those desperate hours. Her attorney father had taught her well, every clause was ironclad, every contingency considered. In exchange for her full financial backing and intellectual property contributions, Elena would receive 60% ownership of Sterling Industries. Marcus would maintain operational control as CEO, but only as long as he honored their marriage vows. The betrayal clause was crystal clear. Should Marcus Sterling engage in adultery or publicly humiliate his spouse, full control of Sterling Industries, including all assets, patents, and subsidiary companies, shall immediately transfer to Elena Rosewood Sterling. Elena laughed softly, remembering how Marcus had signed without hesitation, too grateful for salvation to consider future consequences. "You'll never need this protection," he'd promised, kissing her forehead as he scrawled his signature across the final page. "We're partners in everything." She photographed each page with her phone, then carefully returned the original to its portfolio. This document was her insurance policy, her proof that Sterling Industries had been built on her foundation, not Marcus's charm. Every breakthrough, every patent, every dollar of profit traced back to her initial investment and intellectual contributions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "How are you holding up? Remember, you're stronger than you think." Elena smiled, typing back, "I'm remembering exactly how strong I am." She spent the rest of the morning cataloging other forgotten evidence, email chains where Marcus sought her technical advice, patent applications listing her as co-inventor, financial records showing her continued investments in company research. Marcus had been so focused on public relations and merger opportunities that he'd lost track of the legal foundation upon which his empire stood. The irony was perfect. The man who prided himself on reading every contract, who'd built his reputation on attention to detail, had completely forgotten the most important agreement he'd ever signed. His arrogance had become his blind spot, his success a curtain that hid his own vulnerability. Elena pulled out her laptop and began drafting an email to her attorney. It was time to remind Marcus Sterling that some contracts couldn't be amended by wishful thinking or willful amnesia. Their marriage might be ending, but their business relationship was about to become much more interesting. As afternoon shadows lengthened across her study, Elena felt a familiar excitement building. The same thrill she'd experienced solving complex algorithms at MIT, the rush of seeing solutions where others saw only problems. Marcus had taught her many things over the years, mostly about the price of trusting too completely. But he'd also shown her something valuable, how easily powerful men forgot the women who'd made their success possible. That would be his first and final mistake in underestimating Elena Rosewood. The courthouse steps gleamed wet from morning rain as Elena walked toward the imposing granite building, her navy suit crisp and a silver briefcase containing 15 years of carefully preserved truth. Daniel fell into step beside her, his presence a steady comfort in the storm that was about to break. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly, adjusting his tie, a nervous habit she remembered from their law school study sessions. "I'm not alone," Elena replied, her voice calmer than she'd felt in years. "I have the truth." Inside courtroom 7B, Marcus sat confidently at the plaintiff's table, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. Vivian occupied the gallery's front row, her red lips curved in a satisfied smile as photographers captured what she assumed would be her triumphant moment. The media had already written the story. Brilliant tech mogul gracefully divorces his quiet, dependent wife. Judge Catherine Morrison entered with measured steps, her grey hair pulled back severely and her expression unreadable. Elena had researched her thoroughly, a former corporate attorney known for her sharp intellect and impatience with legal games. "Mr. Sterling," the judge began, reviewing the petition, "you're seeking dissolution of marriage with the proposed asset division outlined here. You claim Sterling Industries as separate property developed during marriage but with premarital foundations." Marcus's attorney, a silver-haired man in a $3,000 suit, stood smoothly. That's correct, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling founded the company before marriage. Mrs. Sterling contributed as a supportive spouse but held no formal business role. Elena felt the familiar sting of erasure, but this time it was accompanied by anticipation rather than resignation. Across the aisle, Marcus caught her eye and offered what he probably intended as a reassuring smile, as if he were doing her a favor by keeping the proceedings civilized. Mrs. Sterling, Judge Morrison continued, do you contest this characterization? Elena's attorney, Sarah Chen, rose with deliberate precision. We absolutely contest it, Your Honor. We have documentation that fundamentally contradicts every claim made by the petitioner. The courtroom grew quiet as Sarah approached the bench, carrying the leather portfolio Elena had retrieved from her study. Marcus's confident expression flickered with confusion. He clearly didn't recognize the folder that contained his legal doom. Your Honor, Sarah announced, I present the original partnership agreement between Marcus Sterling and Elena Rosewood, dated March 15, 2009, establishing Sterling Industries as a joint venture with Mrs. Sterling holding majority ownership. Elena watched Marcus's face drain of color as recognition dawned. His attorney frantically whispered in his ear, but Marcus seemed frozen, staring at the document he'd signed in desperation and forgotten in success. Judge Morrison studied the contract with increasing interest, her eyebrows rising as she read the betrayal clause. Mr. Sterling, are you familiar with this agreement? Your Honor, Marcus's attorney stammered, my client would need time to review. I'll read the relevant section aloud, the judge interrupted, her voice cutting through the courtroom's tension. In the event that Marcus Sterling engages in adultery or publicly undermines his spouse's dignity, full operational and ownership control of Sterling Industries, including all assets, patents, intellectual property, and subsidiary companies, shall immediately transfer to Elena Rosewood Sterling. A collective gasp rose from the gallery. Vivian's satisfied smile crumbled as reporters began frantically typing. Marcus gripped his table's edge, his knuckles white with the realization that his empire was built on borrowed time. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, this contract establishes Mrs. Sterling's initial investment of $8 million and lists her as the primary inventor on 17 foundational patents currently valued at over $2 billion. Elena remained perfectly still, watching 15 years of careful planning unfold with mathematical precision. Every document, every photograph, every carefully preserved email had led to this moment when truth would finally speak louder than charm. Sarah presented additional evidence. Bank records showing Elena's continued financial contributions, email chains revealing her technical guidance on breakthrough innovations, and patent applications listing her as co-inventor on technologies Marcus had publicly claimed as his sole creations. The evidence clearly shows, Sarah concluded, that Sterling Industries was built on Mrs. Sterling's intellectual property and financial foundation. The betrayal clause was triggered when Mr. Sterling began his public relationship with Ms. Cross while still married. Judge Morrison's gavel echoed through the silent courtroom. Given the clear contractual obligations and overwhelming documentary evidence, I find that Sterling Industries and all related assets belong to Mrs. Elena Sterling. The divorce petition is granted, but the asset division proposed by the petitioner is rejected entirely. Marcus sat motionless, his empire evaporating in a single sentence. Vivian rushed from the courtroom as cameras captured her retreat, her merger dreams disappearing with Marcus's fortune. The man who had built his reputation on never forgetting a detail had forgotten the most important contract of his life. 6 months later, Elena stood in the redesigned lobby of what was now officially called Rosewood Technologies, the company's new name etched in elegant silver letters above the reception desk. Gone were the cold marble and intimidating steel fixtures Marcus had favored, replaced with warm wood, living walls of green plants, and artwork from local artists, a reflection of the values-driven company she was building. The quarterly reports show employee satisfaction up 60% since the restructuring, Daniel said, approaching with a tablet full of metrics that would have made Marcus proud, though for entirely different reasons. As the company's new chief operating officer, Daniel had helped Elena transform Sterling Industries from a cutthroat profit machine into an ethical technology leader. Elena smiled, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as employees collaborated in the outdoor garden space she'd added, a stark contrast to Marcus's closed-door culture of competition and secrecy. Numbers matter, but not the way Marcus thought they did. Happy employees create better innovations. The transformation hadn't been easy. Elena had spent the first month after the divorce dealing with a media storm that painted her as either a vindictive ex-wife or a hidden mastermind who'd orchestrated Marcus's downfall. The truth, as always, was more complex and more human than either narrative suggested. Marcus had been forced to declare bankruptcy within weeks of losing Sterling Industries. Vivian had promptly ended their relationship, leaving him alone in a rented apartment, his reputation in ruins and his network of fair-weather friends suddenly unavailable. Elena felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet sense of justice finally served. "The Tokyo delegation is here for the quantum computing partnership announcement," Daniel reminded her, straightening his tie in the nervous gesture that had become endearingly familiar. Elena looked at him, really looked, seeing past the colleague and childhood friend to the man who had supported her dreams even when she'd stopped believing in them herself. "Daniel, before we go in there, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" he asked, concern immediately clouding his features. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's finally right." Elena stepped closer, her heart racing with a different kind of anticipation than courtroom battles or business negotiations. "I've been so focused on reclaiming my professional identity that I almost missed something equally important." Daniel's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Elena. You've been my constant for 25 years, she continued, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "You celebrated my successes when I was too modest to acknowledge them, supported my dreams when I was too scared to pursue them, and reminded me of my worth when I'd forgotten it completely." The lobby around them seemed to fade as Elena took his hands. "I don't want a business partner or a convenient rebound. I want a true partnership with someone who sees me clearly and loves me anyway." Daniel's smile was radiant, transforming his familiar features into something entirely new. "I've been waiting for you to see what was always right in front of us," he said softly. "Not the broken woman married to Marcus, not the vengeful ex-wife the media portrayed, but Elena, brilliant, generous, unstoppable Elena." Their kiss was gentle and sure, nothing like the passionate desperation of her youth with Marcus, but something deeper, the warmth of coming home after a long, difficult journey. When they broke apart, Elena noticed their employees watching through the glass conference room, their faces bright with approval and affection. The Tokyo delegation waited patiently, understanding that some moments transcend business schedules. "Ready to change the world?" Daniel asked, offering his arm. Elena looked around the company she'd reclaimed and transformed, felt the solid warmth of a love built on friendship and mutual respect, and smiled at the future stretching ahead, uncertain but bright with possibility. "I already did," she replied. "Now I'm ready to build something even better." As they walked toward the conference room together, Elena caught her reflection in the polished doors, no longer the invisible wife or the vengeful ex, but simply herself, Dr. Elena Rosewood, technology innovator, ethical business leader, and a woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from remembering our own worth. The afternoon sun streamed through the lobby windows, casting everything in golden light, and Elena realized that some endings were actually beginnings in disguise. Life lesson: true success isn't measured by what we take from others, but by what we build for ourselves and our communities. When we align our work with our values and surround ourselves with people who see our worth, we create not just wealth, but meaningful legacy. 6 months later, Maya stood in the community garden that Alex had designed in partnership with Blackstone Tech's corporate social responsibility program. The morning sun filtered through the fruit trees they had planted together, casting gentle shadows on the raised beds where neighborhood families grew vegetables and children learned about sustainability. "The tomatoes are coming in beautifully," Alex said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee and that smile that still made her pulse quicken. He wore work clothes stained with honest dirt, having spent the morning helping elderly residents tend their plots. Maya accepted the coffee gratefully, her simple engagement ring catching the light. The proposal had happened here in this garden 3 weeks ago, with Alex kneeling among the sunflowers while neighborhood kids cheered in the background. It was perfect, unpretentious, meaningful, and surrounded by the community they had both grown to love. "Margaret called this morning," Maya said, settling onto the wooden bench Alex had built overlooking the central fountain. "Blackstone Tech has been selected as one of the nation's top ethical employers. We're apparently inspiring other companies to adopt similar employee ownership models. And how do you feel about being held up as a business revolutionary?" Alex teased, though his pride in her accomplishments was evident. Maya considered the question seriously. A year ago, she would have been terrified of such attention. Now, she understood that visibility could be a tool for positive change, just like the wealth she had carefully accumulated. Grateful, she said finally. If our story helps other people find the courage to speak up when they see something wrong, then maybe those 8 years of being invisible were preparation for this moment. The sound of children's laughter drew their attention to the playground section of the garden, where several families were enjoying the Saturday morning sunshine. Maya recognized some of the children from the coding workshops Blackstone Tech sponsored, bright minds who might never have had access to technology education without the program. "There's something I want to show you," Alex said, pulling out his tablet. The screen displayed architectural drawings for an ambitious project, a mixed-use development that combined affordable housing, community spaces, and small business incubators. "The city approved our proposal," he continued, his excitement barely contained. "We can break ground next spring. The first phase will house 30 families, and the commercial spaces are already committed to local entrepreneurs." Maya studied the designs, seeing Alex's passion for creating spaces where people could thrive. The buildings were beautiful but practical, incorporating sustainable materials and energy-efficient systems that would keep costs low for residents. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it completely. "But the funding is already secured," Alex grinned. "Anonymous donor. Someone who believes in investing in communities rather than just profits." Maya tried to look innocent, but Alex knew her too well by now. "Maya Chen, you're supposed to discuss major financial decisions with your future husband." "It's not that major," she protested. "Besides, you'd have said no if I asked first. You're too proud to accept help, even when it's for a good cause." Alex pulled her closer, his kiss tasting of morning coffee and shared dreams. "I love that you see problems and immediately start solving them. But I also love that you're learning to let other people take care of you too." It was true. Maya had spent so many years being self-sufficient that accepting love, real, unconditional love, had been harder than taking control of a corporation. Alex's patient affection had taught her that vulnerability could be a strength rather than a weakness. "Speaking of letting people take care of me," Maya said, "Margaret insists on planning our wedding reception. She claims it's the least the company can do after I single-handedly prevented corporate disaster and restored faith in ethical business practices." "Margaret has a flair for drama," Alex laughed. "But she's not wrong. You did save a lot of people's livelihoods." Maya watched a young mother teaching her daughter to plant seeds in one of the garden beds. The little girl's concentration was absolute as she carefully patted soil around a tiny seedling, her face bright with the possibility of growth and harvest. "I used to think power meant being able to control outcomes," Maya mused. "Now I think it means creating conditions where good things can grow naturally." Alex squeezed her hand. "Your grandmother would be proud of how you used her gift." "I hope so. She always said that money was like seeds, worthless unless you plant them in good soil." Maya paused, thinking of the woman who had shaped her values. "I think she'd approve of the harvest." As they walked home through streets lined with trees Alex had helped plant and past businesses that employed people Maya's programs had trained, Maya felt a deep sense of completion. She had learned that true victory wasn't about defeating enemies. It was about building something so positive and strong that darkness couldn't take root. That evening, as they sat on Alex's small balcony overlooking the city, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From invisible assistant to corporate owner to community leader to beloved partner, each role had taught her something essential about courage, integrity, and the quiet power of doing right when no one is watching. "What are you thinking about?" Alex asked, noticing her contemplative mood. Maya smiled, looking out at the lights of the city where thousands of people were living their own stories of struggle and triumph, love and loss, dreams planted and harvests gathered. "I'm thinking that sometimes the best stories are the ones that begin with everyone thought she was invisible," Maya said, and end with "but she was there all along, building something beautiful in the shadows." Alex raised his coffee mug in a gentle toast. "To building beautiful things in the shadows. To bringing them into the light when the time is right," Maya replied, clinking her mug against his as the stars emerged overhead, witnessing another quiet victory in a city full of untold stories. "Life lesson, The greatest transformations often happen quietly, through consistent acts of integrity and love. True fulfillment comes not from defeating others, but from building something meaningful that outlasts any individual victory or defeat.